So today I just kind of wanted to jump on here and I wanted to talk a little bit about my birth story with my two little kids. So I've been seeing recently a lot of like either birth videos or stuff like that, and it's kind of inspiring even though I've already been through it. It's inspiring to watch the different way that women go through and give birth, and also just to let any mom-to-bees know that every birth is completely different, even with the same woman, and it's hard and it's scary, but it's also amazing and wonderful. So I just kind of wanted to tell my stories and yeah, let you guys know I got hair. So attractive. Blech. Anyways, and as you know, I'm just a peach today. Anyway, so my oldest will be 4 in March, and now I am mucked up my lipstick. Better-ish. Any hooser. Gee, could I sound more Canadian? Anyway, so my oldest will be 4 in March. Can't believe she's already gonna be 4. I already cried about it the other night when I was telling her about going to school, and she's like, I don't want to go to school, Mommy. I'm scared. I don't want to grow up. And I said, and then immediately my waterworks started, and I was like, I don't want you to grow up. I want you to be my baby forever. Anyways, so my pregnancy with her, both of my pregnancies actually, I know a lot of women are probably going to hate me for saying this, especially some in my close friend group, because they did not have easy pregnancies, but my pregnancies with both of my kids were fairly easy and fairly uneventful. Nothing really to be said. I didn't have a whole lot of symptoms, other than at the very beginning I had heartburn, and towards the end of both my pregnancies I had heartburn pretty bad, but honestly I was lucky and that was really my only symptom. With my son, I had a lot of, towards the end, he was really all up in my ribcage, and I was working an office job at the time, so I was sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day, and that was just oh, that was brutal. But I mean, I know compared to a lot of women that's nothing, that's a walk in the park. Hold on, my dog is scratching it. I'm back. Yeah, so I know for a lot of women the symptoms that I had are a walk in the park. I didn't have any morning sickness. I think I got sick once or twice with my daughter. Other than that was about it. So I had midwives for both of my pregnancies. It was a choice that I made from the beginning. I don't know what it was that kind of drew me to wanting midwives, because I really hadn't done a whole lot of research. At the time where we lived when I was pregnant with my daughter, the midwife clinic was literally 5 minutes down the road. And even though my husband had told me that some of his other friends girlfriends who had been pregnant and didn't have great experiences there, but there was just something, I immediately knew that I wanted midwives, and that's how my pregnancy and my labor was going to go. I was going to have midwives. Probably also because at the time I did not like our doctor, and I was like, I do not want this man delivering my baby. So yeah, I went with midwives. They're called Nottawasaga midwives. At the time we were living in Passaic Beach. And yeah, so I had a wonderful experience with them. The way that my midwife center worked is you get put on a team, and there's lie down. and they work in teams of 3. So there's always one midwife in the office, one on call, and one who's off. So it just depends on who you get when you actually go into labor. And yeah, so it was pretty, like, I was 39 weeks when I got pregnant, or when I went into labor. 39 weeks when I went into labor with my daughter, and it was just, I had just finished work at one of my jobs. I was working 2 jobs at the time. I had just finished work at my one job 2 days prior, so Sunday had been my last day, and I went into labor on the Tuesday. And all that happened was I was standing cooking dinner. I think it was like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And I was standing in the kitchen cooking dinner for my husband, and all of a sudden it felt like I peed. And I was like, well, I didn't just pee my pants. I'm like, we're not there yet. So I was like, did my water just break? And then I frantically called my mom. I'm like, Mom, what does it feel like when your water breaks? And then I was Googling stuff, and then I called my midwife clinic, and they said to come in and they would check me because they have a test to see if it's your water or if it's something else. So about 20 minutes later, my husband comes in the door after I'd just been on the phone with everybody trying to figure out what was going on. And I'm like, so my water broke and we're going to the midwife office right now. So we went and did that. She checked me, my water had broke. So then we went to the hospital because I was like, I forget what the test or what it's called. It's like GBS. I forget what it is, but I was positive for whatever that is. And so once your water breaks, you're supposed to go to the hospital right away, even if you're not, even if you're not in active labor, because you have to go on antibiotics so that your baby doesn't get it. Because I think it can turn into like meningitis or something. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, so yeah, so we went to the hospital, and I think we were there at about 8 o'clock. And then I hadn't had any contractions yet as we were at the hospital, but as they were hooking me up to the fetal monitor and all that stuff is when I had my first contraction. My midwife was actually asking me, so have you had any contraction yet? And as I was going, no, I had, I think that's a contraction. So then we also called my mom and my sister because they were coming up to be at the birth. So called them, and they were on their way. And then I was in labor for 10 hours, I believe. I wanted to do natural birth, not really for any like reason other than I'll give it a shot. If I need an epidural, then I need an epidural. I really didn't have a birth plan. I didn't, because for me, if I plan something and it doesn't work out the way I plan, then that's when I get like anxious and I get all upset and flustered. So I was like, I have no idea what's gonna happen. I have no idea what to expect with it. So we're just gonna kind of go with the flow and see what happens. So that's what we did. And I think I was in labor for almost a total of 12 hours. My daughter was born at 7:57 a.m. The midwife told me, she's like, this baby's gonna be born before 8 o'clock. Guaranteed. She was. 3 minutes to spare. My labor wasn't really all that eventful. Nothing happened. Like, nothing bad happened. Although, other than the fact that I had to push for 2 hours. Because when my water broke, I don't know if it's because I was standing or whatever it was, but when my water broke and her head descended, it descended cockeyed. So every time I was pushing, when I was trying to get her past my actual pelvis, every time I was pushing, her head would slip back. So it took me 2 hours to push her out, which was exhausting. But I remember saying to my mom afterwards, I'm like, good thing you're in pain So you have no concept of time. Because if I had have known that I had been pushing for 2 hours, I think I probably would have given up. But yeah, so that was the only thing that was really like majorly eventful in my labor with my daughter. And I think she was 7 pounds 5 ounces when she was born. And yeah, she was healthy and nothing was wrong. And then it was all good. And then with my son, it was just, went with the same midwives again. And again, had a great experience. It was a little bit different this time because while I was pregnant, we were living at my mother's, which was an hour and a half south of where we were living before. But then we moved back up to where we were living like a couple weeks before I gave birth. So hold on. What was I saying? I don't remember. Yeah, so we moved only a couple weeks before I ended up giving birth to my son. I did have midwives when I was at my mom's. I didn't click with them. There was nothing on their part that they did to make me feel uncomfortable. I just didn't feel as comfortable with them as I had with my previous midwives, with the Nottawasaga midwives. So I don't know what it was. I just didn't kind of connect or click with any of the women. I had a lot going on at that time too, so that may have been it. But anyways, so then so I think I was 39. Oh no, I was 39 and 2 days when I gave birth to my son. Because I remember at 39 and 1 days, I was like, okay, this is when the last one was born. This one's coming out now too. But I remember this time around it was a little bit different. I was having contractions for probably about a whole day before I actually went into like active labor. My water hadn't broke or anything. So I called my midwives and I was like, so yeah, I think I'm having contractions. They're like, well, they're probably just Braxton Hicks. I'm like, no, they're not. Thank you very much, but I've been through this once before. They're not. And so they went in and they checked me. They're like, well, you're like 3 to 4 centimeters dilated, but this can last for like a couple days. I'm like, oh, no way. This is not lasting for a couple days. I'm like, I'm going to have this baby out in a couple days. Or in like the next day or so. And so they checked me. They sent me home. They're like, call us if anything else changes. If they get stronger or whatever, closer together. So went to sleep that night, was having contractions. I was forcing my daughter to nurse to try and bring on labor, and she was like, Mom, what are you doing? Because she was like 18 months at that point, and she really wasn't nursing all that much. She nursed really only to like go to bed at that point. Sometimes for a nap, but I don't even think she was. I don't really remember. And so yeah, I was nursing her like, okay, come on, help me. And then my brain is just all over the place too. And then so the next day, then my contractions were a little bit stronger, but they weren't really any closer together. They were like 10, 15, 20 minutes apart at that point. But I was like, okay, these are definitely stronger. Like they were stopping me in my tracks, and I was like, okay, these are like, we're getting there. So then I called my midwives again. They were actually already at the hospital with another mom who was in labor. So they said, come in, we'll check you, possibly do a stretch and sweep, and then go from there. So I went in, they checked me. I think I was like 4 centimeters. But they're like, but your cervix is pliable, whatever. I don't remember all the terminology. So they're like, we can do a stretch and sweep, see if that helps bring anything along, and then just see what happens. So they did that, and oh boy, that is the most uncomfortable feeling in the world. Like, it literally felt like my midwife was elbow deep inside, like, reaching around in there. It feels like someone is, like, grabbing your stomach and twisting around. It was, like, the most bizarre and uncomfortable feeling ever. But anyways, so they did that. And then they sent me on my way, and they're like, see if that helps. And, like, go for a walk, go walk around, and call us back when your contractions are, like, 4 minutes apart. So me and my mother-in-law went to Winners and just walked around with my daughter. And we were just, like, walking around. She had my daughter in the shopping cart, and she was getting suckered by my daughter to buy her all the stuff she wanted. But yes, we were there, and so my contractions were getting like 4 minutes apart, but I was like, whatever, like, they're still not that bad, I can walk through them. Had like the contraction timer thing on my phone, so I was like, so then it was like an hour or so later, they called me back and they're like, so what's going on? And I'm like, oh, well, my contractions are like 4 minutes apart. They're like, well, why don't you come back in? So they came in, they checked me again, and they're like, okay, well, your water still hasn't broken, so we'll give you, and you're not in like active labor yet, so we'll give it like an hour and a half, I think is what they told me, and then if your water still hasn't broke by then we'll break it for you. I was like, okay. So I'm just like lying there. At this time, my husband is at the hospital with me. So I'm just lying there in the hospital bed, walking around, blah, blah. Like, trying to get my water to break, but like, how do you get your water to break? You can't do anything, it just happens. So, yeah, so I just was, they were trying to get my water to break, but it didn't. So at the end of an hour and a half, they broke it for me, and that was like, it's like floodgates opened. I was like, whoa, okay. Because before, when my water broke with my daughter, it wasn't like this huge all at once. It was like a slow little trickle. So I guess only part of it had broke. But anyway, so then they broke my water, and then contractions slowly started increasing, and they were like, okay, well, if you're not in like active labor in the next hour or so, like, we may have to give you Pitocin or whatever it was, to kind of help speed up your labor. But so I actually had a midwife, and then there was a student midwife who was there in the room most of the time, because the other midwife was with the other mother. So the midwife kept coming in and checking, and I was kind of just walking and rocking through my contractions. Like, they were like strong at that point. But I remember at one point hearing the midwife go to the student, and she was like, is she like in active labor? And the midwife was like, and the student was like, yeah, she is. And she's like, okay, she doesn't look like it. Because I guess I wasn't really like showing that I was in pain or anything. But and then a couple hours later, I remember her going in, and I was having a really strong contraction, and I was like breathing really heavy through it and everything. She's like, that's better. I'm like, oh, okay, you just wanted to see me in pain? Here you go. But anyways, yeah, so I think with my son, my total, I think I was in labor for a total of 5 hours. He was born at 11:02 p.m. I remember saying to my husband, because he was one of our friends came to the hospital and was going to go get coffee was going to take my husband to go get coffee for him and for me for later on, I guess. I don't know. Sorry. As my husband was about to leave to go with him, I guess that's when like my body was starting to tell me to start pushing. So I was crying, and he's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I'm like, why does this always happen overnight? I'm so tired. I just want to sleep. But anyways, so I didn't end up leaving then, because I think about 15, 20 minutes later is when my son was born. Yeah, and I just remember all of a sudden, like, my contractions just got super, super, super intense. And it was my body telling me that it was time to push. And my midwife was like, do you want to start pushing? I'm like, no, I don't think so yet. No. And then she was like, well, do you want me to check and see? And I was 10 centimeters dilated, and she was like, well, if you want to start pushing, you can start pushing, like, you can try. So I think I was laying on my side and holding onto the bed rails for dear life. And then, yeah, so then I started pushing, and I was on my back, and I ended up on my back somehow, and I was pushing, but it was like, really, I think he was pushing up against the top of my pelvis, so it was like really, really painful. So they were like, why don't you try and climb up onto your knees and hold onto the back of the bed. They raised the head of the bed, and I was like leaning over it. So eventually, after saying like, no, I can't move, it's too painful, they did get me up on my knees, and then I think I pushed 3 times and my son was out. But I remember at one point, after his head, he had crowned and his head was just kind of, I think his head had come through and it was just like around his neck or whatever. And I remember just screaming at the midwife, it's like, get him out of me! Because it felt like the next contraction was not coming. Felt like it was like 10 minutes in between contractions, but in reality it was probably like 30 seconds, maybe not even. I was just at the point I was like, get this kid out of me. Don't leave him hanging there. But then the next push, he was out. And then, because I was up on my knees, he just fell out onto the bed. And I remember she handed him up to me, but I think the cord had gotten wrapped around his neck as he came out. So he wasn't breathing at first, which I was like, it happened so bad I didn't really realize what was going on. And I was trying to like get him to cry, and I'm holding him, but I'm still on my knees, and they're down there doing whatever they're doing. And then I remember, they were trying to get me to turn over. So for some reason, I put him back down on the bed in front of me in between my knees. And then that's when the midwife noticed that he wasn't making it. He wasn't crying yet. So all this happened in like a few seconds. So then they cut the cord and right away, and then they took him over and they got him. He was fine. There was nothing wrong. It just took him a couple seconds because I guess the cord was around his neck. And then, yeah, and then he was fine. He came out and he was 8 pounds, 1 ounce. And when the nurse weighed him, excuse me, and she said that, I was like, really? And even the nurse was like, yeah, hold on, let me check that again. She took him off and cleared the scale and did it again. She's like, no, yeah, he's 8 pounds, 1 ounce. I was like, okay, if you say so, I'm going to trust you. You're a nurse. It's your job. So, then, yeah, so he was fine and healthy. Everything was great. And both my kids started nursing, like, right away in the hospital. I didn't have any issues with that. So, the only issue I had with nursing was with my daughter. She had, I think it was like at 3 or 4 months, she or I, or we both ended up with thrush. That was painful. Because every time she latched and nursed, it was like this burning sensation that just... But that was a relatively easy fix. I just went to the pharmacy and got, what's it called, the purple stuff that you put on your boob and in their mouth. And she had a purple face for like a week, but everything was fine. And so I nursed her up until my son was born, because I remember it was probably like a couple days after he was born, and I was sitting on the bed nursing my son, and she crawled up on the bed and wanted to nurse too. So I was like, okay. And she was on one side and he was on the other side, and I was like, nope, absolutely. I was like, I feel like a cow. Nope, this is not happening. And that was the day that she stopped nursing. I was like, nope, no more. Not happening. Not doing 2 babies at once. So kudos to all you moms who nurse 2 kids at once. I could not do it. I was like, I feel like a cow at a dairy farm right now. Like, I can't do this. This is too uncomfortable. So, yeah, that was the end of that for her. I only nursed my son for about 6 months, because that's when my anxiety really kicked in, and I wasn't eating well, so my body just wasn't producing enough milk. So, we switched him to formula, but everything was fine. And, yeah, I don't know, I just remember I was just thinking about the moment when they kind of put your babies on your chest, and for me it's just like, it's almost like it's so overwhelming that I was so overwhelmed that I just like didn't really have any emotional response. I was like, okay, now what? Like I didn't cry or anything like that. I was just kind of like, okay. Especially with my daughter, I was like, well, now what? What do I do? But I mean, having my mom and my sister there for the birth of my daughter was really, really helpful and really comforting for me. It made things a lot better. And then the second time around, I was just like, no, I just wanted it to be me and my husband. He is very squeamish with all that stuff. Like anytime he was sitting down south while I'm reading a book. And I remember when the midwife was trying to break my water, I'm like spread eagle on the bed, just got this like hook thing up in there trying to break it. And my husband just like there with his book, and I look over at him, I'm like, you okay? He's like, yep, I'm fine. With his book covering his face. It was funny. But yeah, those are my birth stories. Nothing overly eventful, but yeah. And to any moms to be who are scared or nervous, it'll be fine. And if you wanted a natural birth, but you end up having an epidural, like, it is okay. Things happen, and it's just how it's gonna happen. And don't forget to speak up, because it's your body, and if something is happening that you don't like, or somebody's treating you in a way that you don't like, whether you have doctors or midwives or whatever, speak up, because there's a couple times, even though I had midwives, that I should have spoke up, and later on, I mean, it was nothing serious, but I was like, no, I should have said that I wanted this or that or whatever it was. But yeah, so those are my birth stories, and I know this has been really long, and I apologize. But anyways, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!